This is DW News Africa. Coming up on the program, what happens when an entire community is poisoned, neglected, and finally says enough? Decades after a British colonial mine closed in Zambia, toxic dust continues to contaminate this town and poison its residents. As neighbors finally seek justice, mothers rely on water that might kill. From trash to trend at Nairobi Fashion Week, designers turn old threads into high fashion, proving sustainability can be runway ready and proudly African. And the godfather of Afrobeat, Fela Kuti, receives a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Grammys. We talk to his sons about Fela's lasting influence back home. I'm Michael Oku. Welcome. We start in Zambia and the town of Kabwe, which for decades has lived with the toxic legacy of its colonial mining past. Today, it's considered one of the most contaminated places on Earth. Its soil, its water, even its children poisoned by lead. The UN has described Kabwe as a sacrifice zone, an area where residents face serious human rights violations due to pollution. Up to 200,000 people have been affected, and after years of quiet suffering, they're fighting back with a class action lawsuit against the mining giant they blame for generations of harm. The mine here has been closed for decades, but the pollution persists. It's why children in the region have some of the highest blood lead levels in the world. DW Special Correspondent Mariel Muller reports.
Jane Nalengo first sensed something was wrong when she sent her daughter to get salt from the shop, but Elizabeth came back with cooking oil. Soon it began to affect the 6-year-old at preschool.
She would forget what she had been taught. Teachers said she didn't understand the lessons. So I thought it's better not to waste money and take her out of school for now and maybe enroll her later again.
Jane took Elizabeth to the clinic. The level of lead in her blood was 58 micrograms per deciliter. Anything above 45 micrograms requires medical treatment, according to the WHO. The doctor said Elizabeth had low red blood cell levels, anemia caused by lead poisoning.
I felt so bad. When her father asked about the diagnosis, I couldn't answer right away. I broke down in tears, then explained that her high blood lead levels were causing her low blood count.
Kabwe was contaminated by a lead and zinc mine set up during the British colonial period. It left children in the area with what the United Nations says are some of the highest blood lead levels in the world. The mine continued operating until 1994, but lead dust from uncovered waste still affects around 200,000 people, according to Human Rights Watch. Small-scale mining continues at the site even today and exacerbates the problem. A class action lawsuit against mining company Anglo-American is seeking compensation on behalf of affected children and women of childbearing age and an environmental cleanup. The claim is that between 1925 and 1974, Anglo-American played a key role in the mine's technical, medical, and safety operations. Anglo-American says it did not own or operate the mine and provided only technical advice to those who did. The Zambian government took over the mine in 1971 and led operations there after 1974. It has acknowledged the need for comprehensive remediation, but Human Rights Watch says it has not done much. The government is not part of the lawsuit. Matthias Chatabankner says he worked at the Kabwe mine for more than 30 years, right up until it closed in 1994. He was a lab analyst. His job was to test samples of lead and other minerals to determine their quality.
Sometimes the plant was covered with smoke, heavy smoke. And that heavy smoke contained a lot of lead.
He often suffered severe constipation, weakness, memory loss and stomach pains.
I can't explain you. If I continue explaining, you see my tears coming down. We are put in dangerous position, some of us.
Lead is still in the air, soil and water, more than 3 decades after the mine closed. Such contamination is especially damaging to children. Jane knows the water she gives Elizabeth to drink is probably harming her, but she has nothing else.
Sometimes she wakes up weak, and I feel very bad when I think of how the whites at the mine caused the whole problem of lead contamination here in our country. My heart is in pain because of this.
She hopes the lawsuit will give her the means to move somewhere else, away from the home that's making them sick.
Joining us now from Nairobi is Alan Ngare, Africa Advocacy Director at Human Rights Watch. Alan, you've heard the stories from mothers in Kabwe struggling to care for children whose brains have been permanently damaged due to lead contamination. What about these stories stays with you most?
For me, Kabwe is one of the clearest examples of environmental injustice in the world today. Having been to Kabwe myself and engaging with mothers, with children, giving really harrowing stories of developmental challenges, cognitive development challenges specifically. So these are the most heartbreaking stories that one sees and hears when you go to Kabwe. It's the human stories themselves that really touch you.
We've seen reports that suggest the mining company's own experts warn that children in Kabwe were getting sick and dying from lead poisoning, and yet nothing was done to protect them. This whole contamination process started back in the colonial era, but are there guardrails still not in place today that could make another Kabwe possible?
I think the challenge with Kabwe is you have a country, Zambia, that has laws that are not being enforced, corporations that are getting away with harm that has been done to the people of Kabwe over a number of years. As you know, there is an ongoing case in South Africa related to the Anglo company that was mining from the colonial days. And ultimately, they sold the mine then to another entity. And the difficulty is that the corporation has benefited over the years from mining zinc, but unfortunately, lead is also one of the materials that was mined out of there, and the dumping of lead right next to the mine, and subsequently it's affecting the water, the soil, the air in Kabwe. That's the problem, and that the laws and regulations at present are not sufficient to address the challenges from these corporate actions.
You say that the laws there are not set up in a way that you can sufficiently address those issues. Do you see those conditions being replicated in other parts of Africa? Could another Kabwe happen in other parts of the continent?
Definitely. I think one of the challenges that we see with business and human rights and corporate accountability is in many African countries, what we actually call it the race to the bottom, which is that African states would lower their standards, would lower laws and standards and procedures in order to attract investment from the outside. This is quite rampant in the continent, where each country is trying to make itself as competitive or more competitive than the other by lowering these standards. I can give you examples of Ghana, for example, where the Galamsey are using chemicals, mercury in mining for gold, and in the process of that, further environmental damage happens. And yet, the laws have not been set up in such a way that they would be enforceable against corporations, particularly those that are not housed or those that are not registered on the African continent and in the specific countries that they are operating.
I was struck by something I saw in your report at Human Rights Watch. Apparently, decades of mining and smelting operations have resulted in an estimated 6.4 million tons of lead-bearing waste piles. What's happening to these piles and what's the danger?
So Human Rights Watch has documented, a lot of the uncovered lead waste in the residential area in Kabwe. When you think about a pencil, when we use a pencil to write, that the lead, what we actually use, that color, that is really the color that this mountain is. It's a black mountain, literally. And what's happening is that it's been hipped over the years, but as you can imagine, there's all sorts of weather conditions, wind and rain, and it moves this dust and it moves this lead. It infiltrates the environment, the soil, it gets into the water system. And this finds its way then into people's homes, either through the drinking water or the crops themselves that are growing in soil that is contaminated. And so this has, this is why we say that the blood lead levels are quite high. And unfortunately, this also has an impact on mothers or pregnant women. Children start getting infected or affected by lead in utero.
Is there any realistic way to prevent similar environmental disasters from happening again in Africa?
Absolutely. Authorities in Africa must halt unsafe mining practices. I think we have sufficient normative frameworks to do this. It's the implementation that is a challenge, and ensuring that they are enforced at all levels, whether it's environmental or health standards, but also just centering the people in decision making. It's all well and good to have development happening in African countries, but if you do not involve the people and fully understand the impact of these business activities, then ultimately what we'll be doing is sacrificing communities for pecuniary purposes.
Alan Gary, Human Rights Watch, thank you.
Thank you.
Anglo American did send us a statement. In it, they highlight again that the allegations date back more than 50 years when they say they only had, quote, indirect minority shareholding of 10% in the company that operated the mine, Zambia Broken Hill Development Company Limited, today known as ZCCM. And then they go on to say, we have every sympathy for the people of Kabwe, the pollution the town experiences, and any harm that may have come from it. Contamination is not acceptable anywhere. Mitumba, or secondhand clothing, is very popular in Kenya, and it took center stage at last week's Nairobi Fashion Week. The theme of the event, Decarbonize, was intended to put more focus on slow fashion and conscious production. Kenya's best designers showcased pieces they had upcycled from used materials.
Chic cuts and accessories made from what could have been waste. The catwalk at Nairobi Fashion Week put a spotlight on upcycled clothes, part of a slow fashion movement that's better for the environment.
We are on our 8th edition, celebrating the theme Decarbonize. It comes at a critical time when the global world or the global system is livid on matters climate change.
The fashion industry produces 10% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, like carbon dioxide. And it creates an immense amount of textile waste.
Fashion is one of the biggest polluter, if not the biggest polluter of the planet.
Kenya is Africa's biggest importer of second-hand clothes that are unwanted and passed on mostly from the US, China and Europe. They land here in thrift markets such as Gikomba, just a few kilometers away from this glamorous show.
So I bought a lot of these fabrics that you saw in the collection, all from the second-hand market, local markets, the Gikomba. So I used those ones and created pieces that can still be, they look like fresh.
But much of the second-hand imports never make it to ramp walks or even into wardrobes.
So we're not against this business because we do realize that there's a big population of traders who actually depend on this for their livelihood. And that's okay. I think what we are calling really and we are pushing really is for the global north to stop dumping.
The founders hope Nairobi Fashion Week will spark more global discussion on the fashion industry and the role that Africa has played and continues to play in putting sustainability at the heart of it.
And from Nairobi, I'm now joined by one of Kenya's leading designers, John Kaveke, who recently showcased his latest collection at Nairobi Fashion Week. John, we're glad you could join us, not least to congratulate you in person on the show and your collection. As we just saw, this year, Nairobi Fashion Week not only featured the latest Kenyan designers, but also aimed to rethink the entire industry, to decarbonize and become more sustainable. Why is that so important?
First, thank you very much for the congratulations. I appreciate that. One thing I know is that this is an ongoing process globally, and I think Kenya is not willing to be behind in this process because we still consider fashion as something very important in our DNA as well. And I think what we experienced in Nairobi Fashion Week in terms of trying to address this issue, and us being as creatives, it's been a process, especially for me myself, to really understand and be part of a process that is an ongoing on a global conversation.
The fashion industry certainly plays its part in contaminating the environment. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yes, it is said that definitely fashion has its own contribution in the carbon, and I guess it's the processes that fabrics are produced, how they're produced. So the whole manufacturing is part of it, and also the idea of how people have high fashion is definitely something that is people have a big appetite for in terms of quickly changing clothes from, you wear it for one season and out. So fashion has been one of the major contributors into this. And it's important that we address it not only as an issue, but also as something that even as us creatives, that we can also be part of the process of trying to reduce it.
John, talk to us about upcycling. What is it exactly? And walk us through the process of one of the most recent or maybe favorite products you upcycled.
Okay, great. Upcycling for me is basically reusing if it's a fabric or a garment that was once worn, and then you hand it over to another. And I think something very interesting about upcycling is the idea that you're being conscious without necessarily going too deep into your pockets. And for me, when I showcased my collection, which was almost about 80% of it was using a fabric that is from the second-hand market, and giving it a new life. What I did in this collection is I went and got the actual fabrics. In most cases, these fabrics are small portions. They could range from 1 meter to about 3 meters. And if you're constructing a garment, if your garment requires like 5 meters and you only have 1 meter, it means that you have to get other fabrics to compensate the difference and create an outfit. So in this kind of situation, I bought fabrics that were from the second-hand market and paired them up with another piece and created a piece. And the difference in this is that as a designer, we normally we sketch the design and then make the outfit. But in this case, you are doing it almost in reverse. You have to get the fabrics, and then the fabrics almost dictate the kind of style that you're going to make. So it influences the construction as well.
As you well know, environmental groups argue that the global north must stop essentially dumping low-quality garments in Africa. As a designer working with upcycled material, what role do you think creatives like you can play in pushing for fairer, more responsible fashion systems?
That's quite a very interesting question, because that has been a topic not only in our fashion scenes as to how do we address the issue of secondhand clothing. If I was one saying we should get rid of the secondhand market or secondhand clothing, yet there is a large portion of people that actually survive on that kind of market. So it is a very debatable issue. Even for us, it's a very sensitive issue, because we are also in competition with secondhand goods, because the clothes are quite affordable, easy access as compared, because labor is expensive in Africa. So it is a very sensitive matter as to how we can address this issue. Before, we used to get stuff from the UK or the US, but now even our secondhand market has, the Asian market, the Asian style has found its way in our spaces. So it's, other than it adjusting or growing smaller, I think it's getting bigger. As long as there's demand, that will always be an issue.
That's a Kenyan designer, John Kaveke. Thank you, John.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
African music made a powerful impact at this year's Grammys in Los Angeles, with South African Tyla and Nigerian-American Shabuzi winning awards. But the standout moment was Afrobeat pioneer Fela Kuti becoming the first African to receive the Lifetime Achievement Award. Our correspondent Azizat Olaoluwa visited his family in Lagos.
Fela Kuti, the musician who created Afrobeat, was loved by millions for his authenticity, charisma, and courage in speaking truth to power. But he was arrested several times, his home was constantly raided by the military, and his music was frequently banned from the airwaves. Despite his global influence while alive, Fela never won a Grammy. But now in death, the protest singer has received a Lifetime Achievement Award. For his eldest son and himself, a 6-time Grammy Award nominee, Femi, it's about time.
Myself and the family are very honored, very happy, and I'm sure all Afrobeat fans all over the world and people who have admired his music and still play and have been promoting it all this time. The Grammys is the biggest musical award in the world, and so it's such a very big, massive statement and award.
Some of his fans at the New Africa Shrine, built by his family to keep his legacy alive, recall what they loved about him.
Whenever I hear that name Fela, what comes to my mind first is freedom for the black man. Fela exposed the government for their, dirty dealings and all that. And the sound is unique.
And Fela means a lot to me, because Fela accommodates many people from different village, different country.
This Grammy honor will be Fela's second recognition by the Recording Academy within 6 months. His 1976 album, Zombie, which criticized the abuse of power by the Nigerian army and the government, was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame last year. I am inside Kalakuta Museum in Lagos, and it used to be Fela's home, and all his personal artifacts are all on display, offering an immersive look into his life. And here is a selection of the shoes he used to wear whenever he was performing on stage. And standing right in this room gives me a feeling as if he's just right around the corner. And nearly 3 decades after his death, Fela's memory lives on. For his youngest son, Fela Kuti, who took over Fela's band after his death, Fela's gift was his ability to combine activism with music that had global appeal.
Fela has already achieved for me the greatest form of recognition available to any human, and that's the love of the people. Like the way classical music from 100 years ago is still relevant, the way jazz music is still relevant. That's what Fela has added, that's what Fela has given us in Africa. Our own timeless sound that transcends race, transcends class, and transcends generations.
Even nearly 30 years after his death, Fela continues to win awards. He remains one of the most daring and politically engaged musical artists to come out of Africa.
That's it for now. Be sure to check out our other stories on dw.com/Africa or on social media. Bye for now.